Welcome. It's so lovely to see you all. This is Where's Left and What Does That Even Mean? Which is a great title, really good title, and I'm pleased I'm hosting this excellent panel rather than participating in it because I haven't a clue really, which I suspect is the point, right? Before the end of the session though, we will have consensus and the left will be reborn. The left will be reborn out of the ashes of its current predicament, and you, in the years to come, will be able to say, fuck, I was there in Featherston when it happened. Right, the left. I went into the gallery as a political reporter in 1992. It wasn't a happy experience for me. I wasn't that happy in there, and I only did it for 2 years. But Labour had staggered out of 2 wild terms, right? And actually, Josie and Sue, you were very much involved in the kind of response to that, the formation of the alliance going into the Greens. And that was 84 to 90. Most people in this room will remember that vividly. And Mike Moore was their leader. I was on the campaign trail in 1993 watching Mike Moore, and it seemed to me that much of his front bench, much of his shadow cabinet was making very little effort in that election campaign in 93. I might be wrong, but I was there and I didn't often see key figures with him. And it felt like Mike Moore was kind of taking the hit between the defeat and the rebuild, which is what the first leader after a significant loss often does. And he almost won in 93, and it tells us an enormous amount about 2 things. One, Mike Moore's incredible tenacity. By God, he worked hard. And the other thing it told us is that National, in that first term, 90 to 93, misread their mandate. They really didn't understand what the country wanted from them after that period from 84 to 90. So it's an absolutely fascinating period in both left and right-wing politics. And since then, Labour have had Helen Clark, Phil Goff, David Shearer, David Cunliffe, I think David Parker briefly, Andrew Little, Jacinda Ardern and Chris Hipkins. How many of them have actually been left? Really left, as opposed to variations on the most timid and equivocal phrase in all of politics, which is centre-left. I always think centre-left is the political equivalent. You know when you go into the dairy with your lotto ticket and the music plays, it says you're a winner, and you think, fuck, my life is going to change. And then you find out it was 4 free lines. So we can discuss that, centre-left versus the left. Is the Labour Party left-wing? And if the answer is maybe when it's convenient for them to be, when it doesn't get them into trouble, then who and what is the left now in this country? So let's make our way through the focus groups, the policy bonfires, the aspirations and good intentions, and go searching for the left with this magnificent panel. I'm going to go through them in alphabetical order. And then can we clap like crazy at the end for all 4 of them? Because they're wonderful. Dr. Sue Bradford, PhD in politics, 10 years as a Green MP, and in my youth, actually it was hilarious because I hope you don't mind me telling the story, but I kind of was the James K. Baxter story, the James K. Baxter one. I had a Labour mum and a National dad. So when we were watching the telly and she was being arrested yet again, it was like my mum was going, oh, isn't she amazing? And my father was going, no, she's not. In fact, I read in the Herald, a 2001 article in the Herald, you didn't actually know how many times you've been arrested. How fucking hardcore is that? So next in the alphabet, so 10 years as a Green MP too, and we'll talk about that a lot, and a PhD in politics. So Sue is really wonderfully equipped to be here today. Next in the alphabet, Josie Pagani. Josie too will be known to many of you. In her case as a commentator, really excellent columnist and stuff in the Post. Josie's worked as a ministerial press secretary for Sandra Lee, and that's right, well. So the birth of a new take on the left. So it'll be fascinating to talk about that with Josie. So she knows the dark arts, ladies and gentlemen. She specialises in aid and development from the OECD in Paris to her current job as head of Childfund here in New Zealand. And if she thinks she was fantastic today and think, oh, I really liked her, then feel free to donate to Childfund as a way of supporting her mahi. Panellist number 3, Craig Renney, economist and director of policy for the CTU. Recently elected to the Labour Party Policy Council, Craig. Former senior economic advisor to the Labour Party and Grant Robertson. He's also worked at Treasury. How long were you at Treasury for?
2 years.
Right. Yeah, and Bill English was finance minister at the time, right?
Yeah, 2 years was my sentence at the Treasury, and I worked with Bill English when he was trying to sell state housing.
Yeah.
And it was my job to tell him that he couldn't afford to sell state housing. That was my time at the Treasury.
Bloody hell.
It taught me a lot about the National Party.
Bloody hell. And then at IMBI, the Reserve Bank, famously good at analysing numbers, really good at sniffing out whether or not there is a fiscal hole. Chris Wikaira, Ngāti Maniapoto and Ngāpuhi. Actually, we should talk about a possible Ngāpuhi treaty settlement, Chris, if we have time, because boy, no, we won't. Chris is director of, I love this, full service public affairs firm, BRG. Nothing like a full service, Chris. And leads the company's Māori strategy work, providing specialist Māori communication and strategy guidance, media and political advice and analysis. Former award-winning, I think many people in this room will remember, Māori issues correspondent for RNZ. You're brilliant at that job. And occasional and very good newsroom columnist. So, ladies and gentlemen, they are our four fantastic. Sue Bradford, let's start with you, but we won't always go back and forth. And I think what would be lovely is if you just feel free to move off each other, just respond to each other. What's
John,
the left?
If we are going to end with consensus,
Yeah.
we have to write some principles.
Do we? Have a remit, form a subcommittee? Oh my God.
3 will do.
What's the left, Sue Bradford? What is the left? Where is the left?
Crikey, that's starting with everything, John. And I'm not sitting here with all the answers. But I think there's many parts of the left. There is no one left and there is no we. And just remind people that politics isn't just about Parliament and what happens down the road here, but it's all around us in our communities, our trade unions and workplaces. And that's where I've been since I left Parliament. And that politics is just as important out here on the street and in the communities as it is, in the workplaces as it is in that place of power. I guess the other thing about left is how do you define it? I did a PhD thesis between 2011 and 2013, which interviewed people from right across what I call the soft middle left, Labour people, right through to my part of the left.
How dare you?
I'm unashamedly radical left, and as part of that I went down a very dangerous rabbit hole for 3 whole months just trying to write a 2-sentence definition of left. And having to get into theory that I'd never dreamed of before, but I ended up so I put a lot of time into thinking about it, and I think there are some shared values and some shared commitments across the left, across this possible spectrum, because I don't know where these people are particularly, except that I know Craig's high up in the Labour Party, which is significant.
Oh yeah.
I'm very low down.
I'm in no political party at the moment, but basically there's goals which I think possibly we may hold in common, which are a commitment to social, economic, ecological and te tiriti justice, which is kind of a coded way of encompassing a lot, and to values like fairness and equity, like participation, participatory democracy, and solidarity, standing in solidarity with people not only in our own country but all around the world. And so that was the kind of definition that I formed for cross-left. But I'm finishing now, but just to get to the radical part of left, which I have no shame in claiming, I'm also part of a left that sees itself as opposed to the structures and to capitalism and colonialism, and wanting to move beyond those into a much more constructive, positive future, which also, from the point of us who are tangata tiriti, not Māori, that is also rising to the challenge that Mātake Mai presented us with, and that is capable of building a left and a power that is capable of working with our Māori brothers and sisters to really constitutionally transform this country. So that's where I'd put radical left. Kia ora.
Thank you. Who wants to pick up on that?
Well, I would call myself radical left too, because I think it's radical to get into government. And where we agree, Sue, is that I think the values that pull us all together in what I'll call the labour movement, are really popular, right? They're values that want to deal with inequality, they want to deal with redistribution of wealth, they want strong institutions that deliver for working people. So all of those things, I would say, unite us, and I think the radical thing is to get into government and actually implement that. And so the values are really important. Values will win you elections. Lack of delivery will lose you them. And so I think in many cases when we have lost as parties of the left, it's either when we haven't delivered on those values, we've delivered other things but not on those values of inequality, redistribution of wealth, and it's when voters look at us and go, I don't trust that you're going to deliver on those values. So I think getting into a position of power is not a compromise, it's actually the radical thing to do. And so, yeah, I suppose very quickly my message is that these values are really popular. So we're not winning, it's not the voters that are wrong, it's probably us.
I wouldn't disagree, Josie. I mean, for me, first things first, do we know where the term left wing comes from?
Yes,
Right.
1789, the French Revolution, and the right sat on the side of the king,
and
on the
the
right
left
side of the king, and the left
sat
sat
on
yes.
the other side of the
Don't
king.
ask a rhetorical
Yeah.
question again.
Thank
Not
you.
on this panel.
Yeah. And the left sat on the side of the king because they wanted to get rid of the veto power of the king, right? It's a fairly meaningless phrase, left wing. What we actually mean is we're progressive. We believe in the idea of progress. We believe in the idea that actually things can be better and we can do things to make things better. We're not conservatives. We don't believe that things are good as they are and we need to conserve lots of things in order to maintain the order. We believe that actually things can be better and the world should be better, and it should be better through our actions. So when I think about the left, when I think about progressive ideals, they're social equity, they're justice, they're ending poverty, in particular child poverty. It's about good work. It's about looking after workplaces and workforces so that work means something and has decency. It's about honouring Te Treaty. It's about looking after the most vulnerable in our society because we know it could be us at some point in time. And so, to me, that's really straightforward. What is the left? The left is just believing in the idea of progress, believing in the idea of a better future, and holding that power that we can deliver that future together.
I think I definitely sat on the right end of the panel.
Although to them, Chris, you're on the far left.
Yeah.
So you can
Where Te Tiriti sits and being tangata tiriti is a very interesting thing because if you look at traditional Māori society, it's actually inherently very conservative. And if you look at one of the key things of tino rangatiratanga, which in the 90s became very stigmatised and had a very negative connotation because it was just tied to supposed radicalism. And mana motuhake, which is the phrase I like better, that's about stand on your own 2 feet, being able to do for yourself. And, you can argue that that's sort of more conservative type, you stand up and do for yourself. But inside that, if you look at hapu structures, which sort of are starting to come back now, but we've ended up with iwi instead as the bigger entities, and they are entities. It's very collective. So it's Māori society sort of crosses right across the spectrum. And if you look at treaty settlements, it was actually national that got them going, and for a long time did many more of them. And it was interesting. Jim Bolger told me over a few whiskies that I paid for one night. He's good at that. I gave him a good listening to. Was in the lead up to the 1996 election, he said they had done Waikato Tainui Raupatu, the land confiscation settlement. They were in the throes of doing the Ngaitahu settlement, and he had rank and file members of National ringing him up and saying, Jim, you've got to slow down on this treaty stuff. It's going to cost us the election. The South Island's going to vote us out. And he took great delight in ringing some of them back after the election when his majority had increased. National had gone up and saying, see, I told you. There was nothing to worry about. But that was about Doug Graham saying we need to do this, and it was about reciprocity and justice, and PM backing him. At times, the cabinet and the caucus were very uncomfortable, but it was leadership that got it over the line, and it was about getting a deal and getting it done. And sometimes I think Labor got too tangled up in, we have to look at the whole picture and all of the issues associated with it, instead of just getting a deal done, which is what we had to do. Because if you look at who remembers the fiscal envelope? Yeah, and the $1 billion cap. Where did that come from? It came from, that was the amount of money that Bolger and Graham thought that they could get away with, that the electorate would accept, and on all things Māori and tangata tiriti, you're mentioning the tyranny of the majority always wins. The majority always wins. And on these issues, and we're seeing it particularly at the moment, the radical part of it, if the voice is seen too loud, the majority goes, ooh, that's too scary. And we've actually gone backwards in the last maybe 5 years because of the uncomfortableness of some of the corridor. Is it wrong? No, it's not wrong. But is the tone of it upsetting people? Yeah, it is. So there's this funny balance between conservatism and letting things happen organically and...
I want to pick up on that. I just want to pick up on your use of the word radical. Can we ever have a radical government if the majority is scared away? Not.
I'll like to answer that. Well, two things from that. I remember Chris my first job in politics was working with Sandra Lee and in Mana Motahaki Pāti, the first Māori party, and. There was a huge fight in caucus. This was a caucus, with the Greens, Mana Motahaki, the Democrats, New Labour Party. Have I missed one, John? No, that was everybody. Oh, Labour. New Labour. Yeah. But there was a huge fight between Laila Hare and Sandra Lee about privatisation, because for Sandra, privatisation, i.e. devolving services to Māori, if it was a private organisation or a public organisation, that was seen as tino rangatiratanga. And for the left, it was like, no, private's wrong, public's good. So that was a really interesting tension, I think, for what I would say radical Māori politics and on the left. But
well, it was Bill English that really put that into force as the Minister of Health in the late 1990s, and you started hearing the phrase by Māori for Māori.
Yeah.
And when you had the growth of the hauora, the health organisations that were Māori going out and doing basic primary health care in Māori communities, because they weren't going to the doctor, they didn't listen, they didn't trust in the medical system. So if you've got an auntie who's saying, boy, you will go and get vaccinated, yes, auntie, it's different.
Yeah,
Cot death was the real first example of that. The cot death rates were horrendous. They went from being some of the worst in the world to some of the best from a by Māori, for Māori approach, because you had credible voices that got listened to. And Bill English funded that.
Yeah, and neither the left nor the right get to define what tino rangatiratanga looks like.
I do want to pick up on what will be elected in this country, and in fact in most Western democracies, right? And the example I want to use is the WEAG, the Welfare Expert Advisory Group. I don't know if anyone in this room's read Campbell Sepuloni's cabinet paper that got the... Man, it's a good piece of writing about inequality and addressing it.
Carmel is here.
Is she? You are not. Well, so Carmel, great piece of writing on your cabinet paper, but you know what's coming now, don't you, Carmel? So, brilliant piece of writing by Carmel. WEAG's convened, does a stunning piece of work, 40 recommendations, none implemented in full. So what fails between the understanding, the intellectual rigour, the commitment, the aspiration, and then the failure to deliver? Not the failure to deliver, but the equivocation on delivery. What happens there, Craig? And so I want to bring you in here.
I think the key challenge there is that we have to, there'll be great aspirations to deliver something. You can see the strong evidence base. You can see the need that needs delivering. But your ability to deliver, both financially, practically, in terms of just the mechanics of government, the number of people that exist to deliver the goods and services, and then actually understanding how you're going to do that then in the community, that's a hard job. And
Is it Labour had an absolute majority? Was it a hard job?
It didn't have an absolute majority in 2017, which is when the WEAG
Fair
came
point.
through. The difficulty is that it takes the government is a supertanker. It takes 3 miles to turn it round. And we've lost the muscle memory in government over the 9 years previously in government. We lost the capacity to deliver. We outsourced many of the delivery parts to a social initiative, which you may well have heard is making a comeback, the Social Investment Agency, because we thought clever people somewhere can just make a few tweaks and that will solve all our problems. Actually, we needed to fundamentally rebuild government in 2017. And one of the arguments I would make is that one of the things we didn't do well in 2017 was realize the scale of that challenge to actually then make those forms of delivery, because we needed to rebuild government after 9 years of neglect. And if we'd put the WEAG into that context, we're saying we're going to deliver it, but we need to actually put the building blocks in place to deliver it as we go through, because otherwise it ends up like a lot of things. It ends up becoming a promise, and people look around and they say they can't see the difference. What I would say to you, though, John, is this, is that there were many things that were done during that period that tackled many of the parts of child poverty. We saw Best Start. We saw the winter energy payment. We saw big lifts to working for families. Were they enough? No. Child poverty still exists. There are 136,000 children in New Zealand today, according to the last measure, who live in material poverty. That means they don't have 2 pairs of shoes. They don't have a winter coat. They don't get fed 2 hot meals a day. In a country as wealthy as New Zealand, that's a sin. And so for us, it's how do we rebuild that capacity of government to deliver that as part of a manifesto program. So we're not just making one promise, we're making the promise on how we're going to actually deliver the policies on the other side, so people can believe us.
So can I bring you in here? There must have been a time in your life when you just, forgive me if I'm wrong, but when you were younger, and this would have been pre-84, I guess, when you just voted Labour,
John,
right?
Stop.
Was there ever a time when you just voted Labour?
I don't think so. Oh, no, very young.
Very young.
Very
So-
young.
so-
But Values was around.
Oh, right.
Values was around.
Did you vote Values?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Bloody hell. Okay. So
Well,
why?
I did join the Auckland Central branch of the Labour Party in 1987 to help roll Richard Prebble. That's my...
So why the Greens? Why was the Greens the place you decided to have a career as a politician in?
I don't like it being like that because I've been in politics since I
Yes,
was 15.
good point. Good point. In fact, the moment I said career, I thought bad word.
But yes,
Yeah.
Rod Donald invited me in 1998 to join the Green Party, and because the Green Party had left the alliance, and I'd broken with Jim Anderton way before then. So I came into the Green Party in the hope of building, just as Josie said, a radical political party in Parliament on all those issues, on the Te Tiriti, on economics and social issues, and on the environment, ecology. And kia ora to the Green Party whānau here today. I know there's a few of you here. And so that was my hope for 10 years as a Green MP. But the party, by the time I left in 2009, it was going in a direction that I felt was starting to undermine that kaupapa.
What direction?
To the right, to be blunt. Like the willingness at that time of the caucus to seriously consider going into a relationship with National to help National govern, even though that was, I don't know how far those debates went into the public, but the leadership of the party talked that way. The other thing that really broke me was the support for the emissions trading scheme back then. Because I just saw, a number of us in the Green Party saw that as just another capitalist game of making money from the climate crisis. And just playing games, and all around the world, these trading of emissions deals, which actually end up planting trees on Indigenous people's lands in Asia and so on. It's just a whole rip-off and a whole big game. And that's not how we're going to solve the climate crisis. So that was the point when the Green Party wouldn't shift on that, which I thought was the core Green thing on Indigenous people and on climate. That helped tip me over. But can I talk about the Welfare Expert Advisory Group?
100%.
Just for a minute, because a lot of my life has been spent working with unemployed workers and beneficiaries. And we had people that had just had so much hope at the time the WEAG reported back. They did this amazing process around the country. Came out, it was 183 pages long, the report, and it had many more than 43 recommendations. And the government Kia ora. The government could have acted on that despite what Craig said, and even if they hadn't acted strongly in the first term, under the second term with Green support, they could have gone the whole way. They could have. And it's the lack of will to take the power. The welfare system in this country could have been completely transformed, and it need not have been a costly transformation like people always talk about it in terms of money, but a huge number of cultural issues. It could have happened. The same with tax reform that should have happened under the last Labor government with support of the Greens.
Chris Wikaira,
it's the lack of will.
I see you leaning forward.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the bit there about your discomfort with even there being consideration of the Greens ever working with National. Wasn't one of the most successful home installation programs ever done a deal between Jeanette Fitzsimons and Jerry Brownlee?
Oh, kia ora. And I did a deal with John Key myself in the lift and somewhere at the back of Parliament. And that was
anti-smacking bill.
And that was on Section 59 of the Crimes Act,
Yeah.
working to get national support for my bill that ended the legalisation of assault on children. And first we worked closely with Labor. Like, I was always happy in Parliament to work with MPs from any party to achieve common goals, common kaupapa. So I totally compromise is incredibly important, and the more you can do that in Parliament, the more effective an MP you can be. I was always into it. I'd always work across select committees. So it's not that, but when you've actually got power, as Labor did in the last term, to make real change, and then you Labor people didn't pick up didn't take the thorn, and I think the election showed the result of that.
To make real change, you have to be part of a coalition, so you can be on the right side of those benches, though, don't you? You achieve little bits.
And I'll be the first to admit that one of the deepest, I mean, it's fairly obvious, the deepest regret of my parliamentary political life, and in some ways my political life, is that I couldn't stay on and be in Parliament to become a minister in a coalition, Green, Labour, to Pāti Māori it would be now, to actually make real change in social development and housing and places like that. That was always my goal, but in my time we never made it. Yeah.
I think there's a tendency to think that the so-called centre left is some kind of beige, version of the left, and actually the centre is never static. So, and in fact, one thing we can all be proud of on the left is that over, generations, we have won. We've won a 40-hour week. We've won, paid parental leave. Paid parental leave, when, I worked on that campaign, Lila Harry led it as an MP, that was completely, the right fought hard against that. It was not a foregone conclusion that we would get paid leave when you have a baby. Now, no one would dare touch that. In fact, National extended. So the victories we've had, we really have helped create a society where these values are there. So the centre is never static. And that's why I think of myself as radical, because I look back at someone like Michael Joseph Savage, what Michael Joseph Savage did in government was he went to where the centre was, and the centre happened to be in a really radical place where they were up for a welfare system. They were up for a massive state housing build. So the idea that somehow the centre is this beige lack of delivery. And the second point I want to make is about delivery. Why is it that the last government didn't deliver as much as it would have liked to? And I think some of it, and this is not just about New Zealand, this is the left globally at the moment, that on the whole, the left is more comfortable in the university common room than the smoko room. So we've done really well at diversity of ethnicity, diversity of gender. We've gotten really bad at diversity of class. In fact, we don't even talk about the working class anymore. So I think it's really important that we understand that in the 70s, our New Zealand Parliament was roughly 70%, 30%. 70% professional, managerial people coming straight from a professional job into Parliament, about 30% trades, clerical, retail. Now it's 100% professional managerial. Even if you identify as working class, you come from a managerial role. That's a problem because the priorities then start to become less about what working people want and more about what the university common room wants.
Right, because there's so much to respond to. And Chris, I want to come to you in a sec, but because Craig is almost spontaneously combusting because he wants to get in. But Chris, I'm sorry, Craig, just before you get going, Chris, I want to ask you how Te Pāti Māori is a response to precisely what Josie is describing there. But Craig, can you...
Yeah, sure. I'm just not sure that it was the National Party that extended paid parental leave last time. I believe it was Sue Moroney, Bill, and it was the Labour Party that extended it to 26 weeks. But I think if you want to view what that, we can criticise the centre left, as Josie says. We can call it beige, we can call it blancmange, we can say it does nothing. If you want to see what radical looks like to me, look at the response to COVID. If National was in office, do we believe we would have had the response to COVID we would have had in this country? Absolutely not. We would have. There are 30,000 people. There are 30,000 people alive in this country as a consequence of our response to COVID. Those are mums, dads, kids, grandparents. We should not be ashamed of that response. We should not be ashamed of that government and what that actually did. So if you want to see radical, that's radical. It was putting money in the pockets of everyone to see them through and to make sure that they were well looked after during COVID. And so I think there was actually, at times, a very radical government in New Zealand. Not as radical as we wanted in other areas. Trust me, there are plenty of things I think we could all agree on. I mean, our response to housing, for example, I think, frankly, has been pathetic. We didn't invest enough in state housing, anywhere near enough in state housing, nor did we actually defend state housing enough. We didn't invest enough in the environment. We created the SURF program, the Climate Emergency Response Fund, but we didn't embed it enough so that when National Party came to office, it just got ripped off for the tax cut. Right? There are plenty of things that we could agree on, but at times it was a very radical government, and it did very radical things.
Can I make one quick point about that? What I'm trying to say, Craig, is that politics is always about choices, right? And if you have 100% basically professional, basically middle-class people in Parliament, and I'm not, I'm middle class, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying that, we should have diversity of experience and viewpoint, right? And not just... my question then is, how is it that you ended up with, and I'm not saying this as a criticism, I'm saying this as something that I think we need to deal with, that the Jacinda Ardern government would prioritise something like roughly $600 million towards decarbonising industry, good policy, but then say that free dental care is unaffordable at about the same price.
Because
now
free
that
dental
tells
care
you
costs
who is
nothing like
making
$600 million.
who's making the priorities in that government and the left.
But free dental care costs nothing like $600 million. If it were $600 million, we would have done it by
Per
now.
year.
Per year. It
Well-
would have been. It would cost billions. $600 million buys you.
Depends how you define it.
So $600 million.
You're the economist,
I
though.
am. And
But
the
I know
person-
that number's
I was gonna
right.
say, and the person who costed the last two winning manifestos of the Labour Party. So $600 million would buy you, if you want to know, it would buy you an X-ray, it would buy you a checkup, and that's it. So you'd know you've got bad teeth. Good for you. So it doesn't actually buy you any free dental services.
Yeah,
right?
that's
If you want
not
to
true.
do,
I
if you
don't
want to
think-
do that,
Yeah.
then spend that
Just to
$600 million.
channel my Julianne Genter, shut up, I'm right, you're wrong.
Well,
Just Chris, can I bring you in here? And let's pick up on what Craig was saying about COVID. So we know that the group of New Zealanders who are disproportionately most likely to suffer poor health outcomes are Māori, right? So why did 6 of the 7 electorates, only Ikaroa Rāwhiti remained with Labour? Why did Hana, a 21-year-old, beat Nanaia in Waikato? Why are 6 of the 7 Māori electorates now with Te Pāti Māori? And what does that tell us?
It proves what's happened since the start of MMP in 1996, that the Māori vote and the Māori electorate is volatile. Sometimes radical, but more volatile than radical. And we saw that in 96 when the electorate vote swept in the New Zealand First MPs,
Yeah.
Tuku, Tutakawa, Rana, etc. With the full expectation, and that was the first voting cohort that split their vote radically. So all the party vote went Labour, all the electorate vote went New Zealand First, and that created enough for that coalition to be created, to come into effect. As soon as Winston went with National, I remember Tutakawa confessing to me one day, said, "We were dead men walking 24 hours after the coalition was announced," because the electorate expected that their vote would create a New Zealand First Labour coalition. And when that didn't happen, next time round, boom, complete other way. They were all booted out. And then they all went back to Labour. And we saw that on an issues basis, foreshore and seabed, 20 years ago, that Māori Pāti was formed, and they won most of them. And this was one of the points I was getting to with that being in coalition. Tariana had a really good relationship with Bill English from their times in that really period of growth in the Health Funding Authority and the Māori Health Funding Authority in the 7 years up to 2001. So we had Whānau Water was created under a national-led coalition. Labour's kept it. We now have a New Zealand First Act national. They've kept it. So it's a legacy thing which has survived in addressing that stuff. It's what we do next time, who knows? If there's a big enough issue like a foreshore and seabed or something which is really pissing us off, then that will be the lightning rod for change.
I don't know if anyone is...
But the other part, hang on.
No, good, this is good.
The other part of it is the Māori Pāti in this last couple of terms have gone really, really well. I mean, people talk about Luxon and his TikTok campaign now. Te Pāti Māori been doing it for 6 years, for 2 terms, and doing it really, really well, targeting rangatahi. Young people are the biggest growth, We've all got... I didn't do it.
I'm just wondering if there's any volunteer firefighters in the room. There is one.
Oh.
You're back. We'll give you a round of applause. What a lovely man. Off he goes.
They've been targeting the biggest population bubble that's coming through in New Zealand is young Māori. And they've been doing it and that's one of the principal reasons why Hana won. And we came off the back of Te Pāti Māori, I feel personally, also gained from Labour just lost the plot with the voters and with Māori voters. The post-COVID hangover thing was really, really bad. And I don't think we can overstate how much of an aberration that 2020 election was. We had been telling people since 1996 in our consultancy that no party will ever govern alone. And then it happened, and I looked at my former business partner who had worked in Parliament for a long, long time. I said, now what the hell do we say? He said, oh, fuck, I don't know. Because it wasn't supposed to happen. And I doubt it will ever happen again. It was a total aberration based on COVID. I know you want it to happen. But
Oh, I do.
yeah, but will it? I can't see it.
A couple of you have mentioned Bill English, right? So let's use Bill English as an example. I think
Most unlucky politician in New Zealand.
Yeah, and so if Bill was here now and you went through the things that you hope to achieve politically, I think Bill would be nodding in furious agreement with much of it.
John, this is very funny. I had a coffee with Bill English the other day and we talked to him. He said, who on the left still talks to you, Josie? And I went, what, apart from you, Bill?
So if Bill's aspirations, and I think he would say this, and Bill is socially conservative, or has been, I don't know where he stands now, but in terms of raising, addressing inequality and stuff, Bill would say, yeah, that's me too.
I'm not sure I agree, John. I
Yeah.
really don't.
Well, I don't know.
So the social investment approach from National is what we would call an actuarial approach. It says, what is the liability of the Crown, and how do I minimise the liability of the Crown so I can then deliver a tax cut? Right? It's not, how can I help people? Right?
Isn't it?
It's not, how can I do things? It's, I am spending money on households, and there are some very expensive households in New Zealand. If I look at them and I can deliver a solution for them, however bespoke, however expensive, it's actually less expensive than the current money I'm spending on them. So there's a byproduct, which is a good outcome for the household, but the primary approach is, how do I minimize the liability for the Crown so I can reduce spending and I can reduce taxes?
Craig,
That's the approach.
I think that's a convenient way of demonising the likes of Bill English. I mean, I can look at someone like Bill English. Even we mentioned Jim Bolger earlier. They believe that what they're doing will be more effective at dealing with inequality. Now, we disagree with that because we would go, well, actually, the thing that Bill English will never agree with is change the tax system. So he will never support a capital gains tax. And that is the most profound thing you could do in this country to deal with inequality, is have a tax switch, take it off income tax and put it onto capital.
And neither does Labor.
Eh?
Neither does Labor lately.
No, I know. And that's what I wouldn't call that beige centre-left. I would call that what Roy Jenkins in the UK first called the Ming vase politician. Yeah. So the professional politician who walks across a, slippery dance floor, trying not to drop the priceless Ming vase. In other words, not take any risks that might alienate voters. Now, that isn't the centre. The radical centre is going, here's a principle, here's a thing I'm going to persuade you of, and I'm going to convince you that a tax switch that puts tax on capital and helps people getting up the hill, not just takes tax off people who've already made their wealth, I'm going to convince you that's a really good thing for the country. That's a radical centre politician. The Ming vase politician don't have a bar of them.
Sue Bradford, Josie's using your word, radical.
Yeah, loosely.
She's capital R radical. I'm small r radical.
It's a dangerous word in itself, because like left, it can mean almost anything, and is meaningless on its own which is why I tried to give definitions of how I see radical left right up front, because I'm very aware that these words can mean anything, and radical can be from the far right to the far left. And left can be stretched across a massive spectrum. But I'd just like to tautoko what Craig said about social investment, which was Bill English's passion. I actually did think Bill English was genuinely serious about trying to improve primary health care. In his efforts on healthcare, I really thought he was very well motivated, and tautoko him for that. But on social investment, it was incredibly dangerous what he did back when they were in government, and I hate seeing it coming back now. It sounds beautiful.
Why? Explain why.
Well, Craig's already partially explained it. It's the accrual accounting way of looking at welfare, housing and the rest of it. And so you'll see now the Minister, Louise Upston, I think the other day saying, job seekers now, if you're a young job seeker, how much you will have cost the benefit system and the taxpayer by the time you're 65. That's the sort of accounting they did on the welfare system. And so it blows out benefits, and so people say, oh gosh, these beneficiaries, they're going to cost us and $50 billion, I think it was, back in...
The announcement over the other day was that they had done a piece of work by Taylor Fry, who were sort of actuaries. They had looked and said, if you're a teenager and you access benefits, then you'll be on benefits for 13 years on average. And for some beneficiaries, you'll be on benefits for 24 years. This applies to 0.446% of all beneficiaries.
Kia ora, Craig.
But that number was used to demonize a whole bunch of people. The reality is most people come off benefits really quickly. And the best thing we can do is help people, is give them active labour market programs, get them into work, make sure the economy's going as well as it can do, delivering good jobs. Just demonizing people just pushes them somewhere else.
And so
yeah,
Craig,
can I just say the other side of the social investment program back in the day was that it was trying to get, and it's everything's solved by data, and this government's like this as well. Everything's solved by knowing everything about quantifying everything, and nothing is about quality or about understanding what people's real lives are like. And so they were wanting to get data out of women's refuge, out of unemployment beneficiary groups, out of everywhere, all the data in the community holds about the wrecked and desperate lives of people that are suffering badly. And a lot of the community organisations we work with just so up in arms, and I'm terrified that they're going to go down that road again. So it's looking at people as statistics, and somehow if they can identify X family in Kaikohe that has 16 agencies working with it, and the amount of government money going into that family in Kaikohe, and then we're going to change the welfare system and the tax system in housing in a way that even further oppresses that family, this is the way forward.
So just to push back on that, because I work in aid and development as well, and I've just done work for some Pacific governments on cost-benefit analysis, and they're desperate for data and evidence so that they can work out where best to put the money, right? And they're sick of the fact that New Zealand, Australia, the UN, the EU own the data, own the evidence, and go to developing countries and go, right, we think you should do this. So owning evidence and data is really empowering for in this case, for poorer governments, right? And I look at something like Whanaora. It's a classic, in some ways, a social investment model where you go, we're going to devolve delivery of services to the communities who know best what the problems are and know best what the solutions are. And we're going to devolve the resources to deal with it. And in the UK, Craig, the social investment approach is a very lefty approach. It's left Labor councils that are doing it. So I don't think we should throw the whole concept of data driving targeted interventions owned by communities, fixing the problems in those communities.
No, you're absolutely right, Josie. I wouldn't disagree. Delivering services based upon data, evidence is, hopefully is what we want, rather than guesses or sort of feels, which is what we have had in the past, to be fair. But I think there's a different way of approaching this, which is saying some of the investment approaches that have been used to date essentially are knowing the cost of everything and the value of nothing. Right? And if we can have approaches that say, okay, you've just come onto our benefit, what's the fastest way we can turn your life around? And the example I would use is the Swedish job security councils. If you lose your job in Sweden, the first thing that happens is you go to a job security council that says, okay, we're going to pay 80% of your salary for 6 months, so that you can find the right job, not just the first job that's in front of you. Right? We're going to look at your training. Are you in an industry that's dying? And if you are, we're going to train you in an industry that has a future. And so you can find a sustainable job. Is the problem you live somewhere really remote and there actually is no work? Because we can help you move and help pay for that, because actually for a lot of people, the big problem is not that they don't want work, it's not a problem that they're unskilled, there's just no work there. And people who use the job security council system in Sweden after 5 years end up with better employment and wages outcomes than people who kept their job during that 5-year period, right? There are plenty of things we can be doing that are really progressive, that deliver a better future, right? The social investment approach that has been used by this government and previous governments is not that.
Craig, I hope that we see this policy coming forward from the Labor Party for the next election.
Sue, that was social insurance. That was the income insurance program. Right? That was income insurance program. It offered exactly that to people. It was going to deliver income protection.
Sorry to interrupt. How hard did Labor sell that? How hard did Labor sell that?
I tell you what,
All capital gains tax.
I tell you what, I sold it to as far as I physically could to anybody who would listen. But it went on the policy bonfire. Decisions got made. I don't work for the Labour Party. So, in all seriousness...
Why did it go on the policy bonfire? I mean, doesn't this come back to...
I think it was a really hard thing to sell in a cost of living crisis. You pay more money. You pay more money in a cost of living crisis, and somebody might benefit. I think the challenge is, as with everything in politics is about timing. And so you've actually got to sell it over the long run. And I sincerely hope it's one of the things at the next election that the party takes to the public.
Chris mentioned the foreshore and seabed. There's an amazing documentary that's just been released on TVNZ Plus called Hikoi. I don't know if I really recommend it. I think it's called Hikoi Speaking Our Truth, just out on TVNZ Plus. So it goes back 20 years, goes back to Don Brash's audio with speech, goes back to Labor's response, which was essentially to just say, the foreshore and seabed is ours, is the government's, right? And this is the birth of the Māori Party, right? And Helen Clark called...
Wreckers and haters.
Wreckers and haters. Incredible language. Incredible language. So this is the disparity between Labor knowing the right thing to do and then resiling from it every time it looks like the shit's going to hit the fan in the middle of New Zealand.
Well, I was going to ask the question of my more learned panellists over here. Has polling usurped policy and principles? And we talk about that Ming Vaz approach where everything's polled up the wazoo and focus grouped, and that's what led to Labor not having a capital gains tax, and that because their polling says, it might cost us too many votes. The thing that a lot of people have missed that was the key thing underneath the foreshore and seabed protest was actually a very Kiwi thing, a fundamentally Kiwi thing, is denying a group of New Zealanders their day in court. And that's what the whole issue was about. Whereas the Māori Appellate Court had said there is a case here to be heard. Now, Māori may have lost, we may have won, but being denied the opportunity to take the issue to court and have it worked through was the thing that really...
And who did that to Māori? Well, and what party did that to Māori?
Labor did.
Labor.
Helen Clark did it. Because the polling was, and I very much remember talking to Barry Soper and him having a
Don't we all?
conversation with Helen about, this is, disaster. I mean, we can't have the Maoris, only the beaches.
That's a very good Barry Soper impersonation. That's very good.
Mate, it'll be terrible, mate. And she panicked. She panicked on it. And that's where I
sorry to
felt
interrupt,
that Labour started losing its way.
So when I asked you what party did that to Māori, somebody in the audience answered Don Brash. In fact, it was Labour that did that to Māori. But Labour were responding to Don Brash, right? They saw Don Brash rising in the polls. So rather than Labour
But
saying...
Māori were less upset with Don Brash than being denied their day in court.
Exactly. So why were Labour's instincts then, rather than Helen Clark to stand up and say, this is morally abhorrent? Well, why
did she not say, let's the court do its thing, and then try and work out a response? Well, you're buying yourself some time to do that. Because again, going back to Bolger said to me, what I would have done is I would have got as many leaders as I could in the room while the court case was going on and try and struck some sort of deal. Use the court process to actually, as time to do that. They panicked.
I do think there's a tendency for us on the left, this is on the right too, which partially answers this question, that the rise of the professional politician has been quite a phenomenon in our political lifetime. And it's that sense, I would probably sort of trace it back to, Bill Clinton and Tony Blair, who were so successful as politicians on the left. But what came with that was the rise of you talk about the polling and focus groups and so on, that sense of the professional politician, that where the rough edges of politics got rubbed off, the kind of moral crusade, for want of a better word, the moral passion, the vocation of politics became something,
The Sue Bradfords.
Yeah, but also, the Michael Joseph Savages, the Clement Attleys, the Keir Hardys. Someone once said to me about the UK Labour Party. It used to be that people joined the Labour Party to make their life better off. Now they join to make somebody else's life better off. In other words, it used to be that, someone like Keir Hardie in the UK Labour Party, coal miner, joined the Labour Party, became its leader to make his community better off. So there's something about, Chris, I reckon, it's not so much the polling and the focus group, because I actually think that's good. If political parties are going, what do voters think about this, and voters are going to think that's shit, I think they should hear that. That's a good thing. But the problem with it is it becomes that Ming Vase politics where you become very careful, risk-averse, I'm
going to pick up on a phrase that Josie used. Have you been rubbed off, Sue Bradford?
No, obviously not, John. You don't even need to ask that question.
But hold on a sec. 3-term Green MP, into your 4th term, roughly a year into it. How long were you? Yeah, and then off you went. Were you rubbed off? What happened there?
What do you mean?
No, sorry, yeah. So what I mean is that in the end, and I think I absolutely...
the impact of being in Parliament?
Yeah.
Why did you leave Parliament?
Yeah, why did you leave Parliament?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With great difficulty, because...
He's not very good at questions.
It's a work on for me. Fuck. I'm still early in my career, though.
I see what's happening in the Green Party at the moment and feel great sadness with some of the MPs that they're losing in different ways and what's happened there. And really, it's made me think again about the two sides of being an MP. That for some of us it's this very fulfilled ambition of finally getting to a place where you can try and make real change on the policies and kaupapa that you care about with the party that you love and stands on your principles together. It's very powerful. You suddenly rocketed into a place of power for me from the street, from being arrested on the streets and being in the unemployed movement for 16 years. I never would have dreamed I would have made it to Parliament, but I did. And the day Nandu Tansosh and I found out that we were elected, we couldn't believe it. It was just unimaginable. And then you go in there and try and do your best, and we did. We tried, and along with our fellow Green MPs, and so suddenly you're getting a salary. Even my executive assistants at that time was on a salary far higher than anything I'd ever earned in my life. So you rocket into this other space. And that starts to rub off on you, the free e-trip, all the rest of it, in being treated with respect all of a sudden, instead of being seen as this Yeah. And then trying to make change and doing what I could, that rubbed off, and I wanted to stay. I wanted to stay long enough in the hope one day of being part of a coalition government where maybe I'd have some position to actually make real change for people. That's why you go there, when you're motivated by that strong passion. But as I said earlier, by 2009, I'd lost a co-leadership struggle inside the Green Party, and that was quite hard. I'd been around the country and seen the Green Party in detail and realised that actually the ground had shifted, and that I'd always said to the groups and people that I came from that if I felt the kaupapa shifted, I would leave. And it's very, very hard to leave, because you're leaving salary, you're leaving place and mana and the ability to make change in a real way that Josie's talked about here. It's a very important. Like, I finally achieved it. I never dreamt I'd be in that place of power. To leave it was incredibly difficult, and I can see why people stay in Parliament when they shouldn't. You see them losing their kaupapa, not just in, this is across parties. You see people that shouldn't be there. There's people that don't give a toss about being in that place except for the salary and the perks, and it's awful. It really, whatever party, it really makes me mad, because I think whatever party you're from, you should be there seriously.
And you should, and it's the vocation.
And the ones that
It's
read
the
the emails and do their puzzles when they should be paying attention to select committee submitters. I mean, there's a lot of that. And so you think, I like to see the serious people there from whatever party. And yeah, it was really hard to leave, but it was that shift of kaupapa and knowing if I didn't stay true, then my whole, everything I'd done in my life would be worth nothing. Same thing with mana. I was part of the mana experiment in 2011 when Hune Harawira and Enette Sykes and us set up a Māori-led Māori-focused party, mana. For the first time they invited Pākehā left tauiwi to come in and join them, and so some of us did. And it was really hard thing to do, to be just a tiny group of tauiwi inside a Māori party, but very educational, of course. Learned heaps. I'm very honoured to have been invited. I stood at number 4 on the mana list in 2011 and ran a campaign in Waitakere. It was an incredible experience, my 3 years in mana, it was like an experimental project, really, to see if that could work. And I ended up thinking, they took in Kim.com, and that was the day I walked. He'd stood up in the national hui at Rotorua and said, among many other things, that the solution to New Zealand's economic future was foreign investment. He said it twice. I said, how could mana support that? We are a left party. Māori Pākehā, it doesn't matter, we're a left party, but how could we support that?
That's when some people started saying, hey, is this about the mana or the moni?
And there was the most bitter struggle on that marae, but by the time, and some of us fought as hard as we could, but of course our voice was not taken, and they joined .com, and I walked away that night. So that's the last time I was in a political party. But I would be in a party again, but you have to trust the people and the kaupapa. And I would just like to say to people here from Te Pāti Māori and the Green Party that I think that those two parties are doing the best job. You're trying really hard, and it's really good to see, despite all the problems. Kia ora.
You, Craig, you don't have to answer this, because we're here, you're all here as individuals rather than representing anyone or any right, okay? But you're now on the Labour Party Policy Council?
Yep, that's correct.
And are you able, I'm not quite sure what the rules are about council, but are you able to talk about that kind of smithy, that kind of, the kind of furnace that is taking place there now? Is it a furnace, or is it?
It very much is. I mean, we're very much in the early stages of this. We've just had an election. There's been an election campaign to the Policy Council. Remits are just being formed around the country. So, for example, a big shout out to my brothers and sisters at the South Wairarapa Labour Party. Last time I was here, there was 6 of us at the meetings. But in terms of the party, we're right at the start of that process. And Chris Hipkins has been very clear that he says everything's on the table. And I can tell you, in talking to audiences around the country, they want to see everything on the table. They're very keen to have everything on the table. So it's right at that beginning. But I just want to talk very briefly to something that Josie said, because I think it's actually something that's really important. Often we do things in government in spite of things. So it's really hard to actually affect change. And it requires you to actually have some often lived experience of how something is in order to go, I don't care what the advice is I'm getting on the other side. You haven't experienced it, I have, and that's the experience I'm going to use to see change. Be that in poverty, be that in unemployment, be that somewhere else, be that welfare reform. You often need that lived experience in order to actually go, well, no, the professional advice I'm getting from, with much love to my Treasury friends, to say, let's not do this, let's do something else. Or the worst words that you hear in government are, this requires more policy work. And you have to do it in spite of them. And that requires a real impetus inside you. And it may well be that actually some of the edges have been rubbed off, and all governments over time, their advice over time pushes them in an agenda of doing nothing. My favourite line from Yes Minister is the first episode of Yes Prime Minister, where Sir Humphrey walks into the room, the new Prime Minister, Jim Hacker, sat down, and he goes, Prime Minister, congratulations on your elevation to this role. Can I suggest magisterial inactivity is the key mode of government? And it feels like that in government at times, because everyone's telling you, that's not right, we're doing a lot of work in this area, a lot of work has been done, let's just come back to it in 6 months' time. And then in 6 months' time, they tell you, well, we've had a look, we've had some consultants in, they've done a piece of work, we're just digesting the work, we'll come back to you in 12 months. And then after 12 months, they say, well, Minister, we've done the work. We now have to go to Parliamentary Council to write some law, to change some things. That's going to take a further 12 months. And then you say, I'm terribly sorry, Minister, we've run out of parliamentary time. Why don't we do this next year?
So, Craig, that comes to the question of how does the left reform the public service, right? And we tend to get ourselves trapped in thinking that it's all about, if there are cuts in the public service, we're going to campaign against that. Well, that may or may not be a good thing. The real thing that we need to do is go, why the hell hasn't the public sector been able to deliver a Labour manifesto? What went wrong? And I think that's, again, not something just for New Zealand. I think it's globally fixing the institutions of government. There's a reason why Peter Gluckman's survey recently, a couple of years ago, or even last year, showed a massive decline in trust from the New Zealand public in the institutions of government and political parties. About half of New Zealanders don't trust political parties, don't trust institutions. So we need to be really radical about thinking about the public sector. How do you, for example, separate implementation of policy where you don't want risk to really contest of ideas, risky decisions and debates and discussions about design of policy? How do we get a public sector that rubs the professional edges off and starts to actually do stuff?
And can I bring Chris, can I bring you in here? Because BRG, I suspect from time to time people come to you and say, how do we get more trust? How do we, and so I guess, is it so, and
You might say that, I couldn't possibly.
no. And nor should you. I've just been shooting in the far north for a project, and I've been talking to mostly low-income Māori, right? And their sense of politics, even including Te Pāti Māori, is that by and large it's not for them. The people I spoke to, that it's elsewhere.
They see no relevance. This is not going to do anything. It's not going to improve our lot. They're of no relevance to us in our daily struggle.
So how do we all, no matter where you stand on the political spectrum, make politics relevant for people who richly deserve it to be relevant?
For people like them, it is delivery on the ground. It is actually making them see that there is some relevance, that there is some things that can be done that will help, lift up the hikitea, lift up people and get them more productive, feeling better about everything, physically feeling better if their whole water's bad, all those things. And that's why, through 3 different governments now, whānau water endures, and it will, because that goes back to that by Māori for Māori thing that Tariana and Bill English supported back in the mid-1990s, and saw the Māori health organisations funded, that devolved funding, its relevance and its,
And that devolution is really, and for someone like Bill English, he's very Catholic, it's a subsidiarity principle, right? You devolve to the lowest level of decision making. You talk about COVID, Craig, and I think, while we need to understand what went right and what went wrong in COVID, really. And one of the things that clearly went wrong was devolving the vaccine rollout to Māori organisations. And that sense of, I think the left gets associated these days with central government. And we need to own that devolution stuff much, much better. And the fact that Māori had to go to court to get the addresses of Māori to be able to roll out that vaccine under a Labour government was appalling.
I think there are plenty of things that we could look at in the cold light of day after COVID. I think one of the things we want to look at across the piece in government is value for money and delivering value for money. Yeah. Nobody in government looks after value for money. That's the truth. Nobody is responsible for spending your money well or looking after it. There is actually no one.
Tell them about the
And
A3
I was gonna
sheets,
say-
Craig. Tell them about
Is
the A3
that
sheets.
you, Roger Douglas, over
Sorry,
there?
No, but I fundamentally believe.
But isn't that what Roger Douglas would have said?
I fundamentally believe that value for money is not a right-wing term, right? Value for money, spending.
And Roger
public
Douglas would
money-
say the same thing, right?
No, but Roger Douglas would say the same thing. He would express it differently when he was talking about value for money. He would place a different value on different things. But making sure that taxpayers' money is used well and continues the social license to be able to spend taxpayers' money is critically important for the left. One of the things that frustrates me...
Sorry to interrupt. Okay, but David Seymour would say that too, wouldn't he?
And he would express value for money differently. I actually don't think value for money is a left-wing or a right-wing idea. It's just a good idea. And the left has to be able to show how its policies are working well, how they're making a difference, and actually that this is the best use of taxpayers'
And did
money.
the left try hard enough to do that?
No.
Tell them about the A3 sheets, Craig. There's no value for money column.
No. Well, so when we write budgets, and one of the challenges is that we get thousands of bids from all the government departments, and the level of analysis that goes into them in terms of value for money is very, very small. It's very, very small indeed. And when you get the final package, you're trying to understand thousands of lines of expenditure and the value for money that you're getting for them. And is that the best package of A or B? It's not really that good a process. And if it's not that good a process at the budget, it certainly isn't that good a process at the expenditure end and then at the evaluation end. And so we often do things blind as government. Now, as the left, one of the things I'm deeply passionate about is actually making sure the left spends its money well and that it delivers great programs well, because we're not having a fair fight here. We care passionately about delivering outcomes for New Zealanders, delivering great outcomes, better outcomes for everyone, right? The right doesn't. If the public service doesn't deliver for the right, great, privatise it. Right? That means people lose faith in the ability of the state to deliver positive, meaningful change. And we have to show why that's really important, because if we don't, we'll lose that argument with the right, and then they will use that as an excuse to strip the state of its ability to deliver that meaningful change.
So if you listen to Craig talk, and then you think about the unemployed, the young unemployed people that you've spent generations working alongside, And so how are they hearing any of this now? Where are they? Where is who?
I'm not going to dare speak for young unemployed people right now, but I have worked alongside unemployed people a lot of my life, and I agree with everything Craig's saying. And in the decades I spent in the unemployed movement, we spent a lot of time doing research and policy development to try and pick up on ways that government departments could change the way that they work with unemployed people and beneficiaries, which is why I cared so much about the WEAG and the huge amount of work that went in there. We weren't used to seeing the government doing so much work, but and then it was just mostly tossed. But for example, I think back to the community economic, the KEG, which was supporting community-based job creation, job support through the 90s. Labor set it up just towards the end of CEDU in 1989, I think. And then National kept it going, and then Labor wiped it out in the early 2000s when I was in Parliament. And through that whole period in the unemployed movement and after, I was fighting alongside others for a part of government that would help enable the community sector and hapu and iwi and union groups, anyone that was dedicated to cooperatives, to different ways of economically organising ourselves, for getting unemployed workers into work, unemployed people into work, including in remote rural areas, because we believe that Māori and others should have the ability to live in rural areas and not just in the cities, which is my one quibble about the Swedish program, because Māori communities were decimated by unemployment in the 80s with terrible consequences up north where I've mainly lived. And so just even in that tiny part of government, the importance of actually putting brains to it, and even though there were a lot of problems with the community employment group, and I was just very critical of them, but the fact that government, even under a Labour government, they lost the will to keep even that tiny piece of commitment to enabling the community sector to create good jobs, doing good work in the environment, doing good work for the local community, that was tragic. And that's just a tiny minuscule. You look now at places in recent years, actually, at MB, for example, on migrant labour exploitation. What should have been happening? People in slavery. We've gone into places to free people from slavery in Auckland, literally. And what was MB doing? And like these really frontline things. And where's the thinking behind that? And now they're just
Writing a report.
Oh.
Now I don't wear a watch, but I'm looking at yours, and hold on, it's 20 past, right? So we've got 10 minutes to go. Is it quarter past? So let's try and, because I promised consensus at the, so we're up against it. But I reckon we can get there. So yes, Mr. Wikaira.
I want to pick up on something Josie said before about radical centre. And thinking about this, there was a brilliant graphic that was in the Dom Post. They did a big feature on US presidential elections when Barack Obama was running for his second term. And it showed the US political spectrum. And right up to the Democrats, then the Republicans, and then out the other side. And they overlaid the New Zealand political spectrum on the American map. And the whole New Zealand political spectrum fitted over the top of the Democrats. Not even the far left of the US, didn't even make the US centre line. So in the eyes of some, we're talking about who is the left? Are we all the left in the eyes of some? Even Lindsay Perigo and the Libertarians didn't make the US centre line.
Lindsay will be gutted.
So you can say, Lindsay, sorry mate, you're a lefty.
Dude, what, as people who have devoted much of their lives to either participating in, thinking about, constructing, responding to politics, what do you think the left has to do now? Josie, Pagani.
I love it that I'm the only one with notes. I've been thinking about this for so long, it's like I couldn't possibly just come without my notes. But I do think the thing, when it comes to delivery is really important for the left, because we lose the social licence for things like a capital gains tax, change to the tax system and so on, if we don't deliver stuff, right? And if we don't deliver good spending, I think we've lost the trust of the public that we can do good spending. And I think the problem when you've got the left has become, I think, dominated by a sort of college-educated middle class, is that you end up valuing the things that you're good at, i.e. eloquence and language and vision and so on. You look at one of the most successful politicians in the world today is a mumbling, tongue-tied 80-something-year-old President Biden who, lacks the ability to communicate a great vision. He's not eloquent, but he's actually delivered transformation in America in terms of the Inflation Reduction Act, the American Rescue Act, I think it's called, the massive infrastructure, built stuff. We used to be the nation builders in New Zealand. We used to open, roads and dams and whatever the modern version of that is now, probably roads and dams. We used to be proud about the fact that we built stuff. We were nation builders, we were aspirational, we were hopeful. There's a tendency on the left now to think the world's going to hell in a handbasket, it's miserable, lives are terrible, also you're fat, vote for us. So we need to own... Doesn't work. It turns out that's not a very good way to win elections. We need to own
You
the
lost me a bit
aspiration.
there.
The point is, the point I'm making, John.
It felt momentarily like an acid trip.
The point is, that's why I've got so many notes on what's left. Stop focusing on changing the language and change the thing. Do the things that voters say are the things. Cost of living, inflation, jobs, regional development, jobs in the regions. Do the things that voters say are the things, and we will renew the left.
Right. No, this is because I think we need to head towards a concluding remark. So I think these are wonderful. So who wants to go next?
I'll try and be very quick, but I think one of the most important tasks for some of us, at least some of us who identify as left right now, and I think there's far more of us than what any one of us realises. There are far more of us, but is to come together as people are already starting to do in unions and in the mass rallies on Gaza and other places, that we need to come together and fight what this government is doing and try and turn it back. We need to stand alongside, for those of us that are Taui, we need to stand alongside Māori in their struggle against what's happening with Te Tiriti and many other racist things this government is doing. We need to stand together across all our lines, ecological, Te Tiriti, and economic and social. We need to understand the links and we need to fight and not wait for the next election. For the political parties, it is really important for Labour, Greens and Te Pāti Māori to have good, I hope, really fantastic policies ready to go for the next election, but the election could be sooner than we think, and we can't wait. We out here on the streets and in the trade unions, we can't wait. We have to be fighting now in as visible a way as possible against everything, every single thing that these people are doing. Kia ora.
Thank you, Sue. Can I talk about that? I mean, entirely, the enemy isn't in this room. The enemy is out there, all right? We have to work together to fight back against many of the things that this government has already done, in reinstalling 90-day trials, getting rid of fair pay agreements. Youth unemployment is now at its highest rate since 2015, and it's only get worse from here, right? There are many things that we all have a shared interest in, and that's the really important thing that I would say is what's here for the left. We don't actually need to change our principles. Our principles are popular. Our principles actually would put us, all in the same place. What we really need to change is some of the policies to actually enact those principles. Change some of the communication so that actually when we're talking to people, we're talking to them in language that they understand and they actually get what practical difference those policies will make. And importantly, when we do so with the knowledge that what unites us, what makes us all work together, the differences between us are tiny in comparison to the differences between us and the wealthy. And that, to me, is the real difference. We need to focus on that difference, on policies that will reduce that gap, that will deliver better housing, better schools, better health services, because that's how we win, because we make a difference. We're progressive. We need to sell a message of there is progress and we can do this together, because otherwise we just let the other side win, and we know what that means because we'll be living it for at least the next 3 years.
Can I say one more thing? Be a broad church. Stop excommunicating people who don't pass a purity test or a litmus test and say that they're not left, they're Tory. I think that's really important, Craig. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, I would entirely agree that we have a job of work to do to make sure that when we talk to people, we're talking to people in a positive and aspirational way. We're talking to people in an inclusive way. And importantly, we're talking to them in a way that they can see themselves in the future that we're talking about. Rather than just talking in, we'll deliver a better economy, but not for you. We'll deliver better housing, but not for you. We need to be having policies that people can see themselves in, and they can see how they can be successful in those policies.
What do they need to do? What does the left need to do? There needs to be, to show stronger leadership. Someone who says, right, I'm driving this bus, get on the bus, come with me, this is the direction we're going. Simplify language, have a better message. It's that Biden thing that Josie was talking about. I talked to Willie Jackson a year before the election, said, mate, you're in trouble on Three Waters. Nah, cuz, we're all right. I said, no, you're not. You're about to lose control of the narrative. And if you lose control of the narrative, you'll never, ever get it back. And he said, no, we're all right. So they doubled down it more, and it was because it was too complicated. It was too complicated, and too complicated is too difficult to explain, and if you can't explain it, then you lose people, and it's also easy for detractors to make mischief with it, and that's exactly what happened.
But also, one thing, because you said the enemy's out there, not in here, and the enemy isn't in here for sure, but what we have to change is in here. You know, you can't not look at it. We can't not look at ourselves when we lose and go, have we delivered on those popular values that we know most New Zealanders support? Because 2017 Jacinda Ardern proved that those values are hugely important. So the work starts in here, not out there.
Yeah, and can I add one last thing, is that I think we need to play National the ultimate political compliment, and that's actually steal how they sold some of their messages. 18 months before the last election, they were talking about crime. And they were banging on about crime and ram raids, and they were saying youth crime is out of control. None of these things are true.
That's not what people felt, Craig.
That's not what people felt.
Because
and they were told
some
that
of it was
for
true.
18 months, again and again and again. And so when it came to the election, the second most important issue after the cost of living was crime. Right? We need 18 months before the election to be saying, what are the really important issues, and campaign on them relentlessly for 18 months, so that when people get to the voting booth, the issues that we care about, that we say we're going to make a difference on, they're the ones they're voting on. And they're really clear what it is we will do to make a difference to those issues, rather than getting to the end and then deciding we don't really know what we're going to do.
We've got 1 minute or 2 minutes, and just a ridiculously big question, but you both used the word enemy, and I'm reminded of that beautiful autumn poem, which contains the line, "We must love one another or die." How do we avoid tribal enmity? And because people float in this country, they go back and forth, don't they? So how do we talk to people in a way that doesn't other them? How do we, and whatever side of the political...
Relevance. What got to appear relevant?
Yeah, but also, Chris, if you look at the two most successful, two of the most successful movements in recent times, civil rights movement in the US, gay marriage. Both of those movements didn't demonise the other side. No. They held a mirror up to the values of, let's say, the Christian values of the sanctity of marriage, and said, we believe in the sanctity of marriage too. And so they put a mirror up to their the enemy, and they convinced them that there was something in this for them, and they were successful. That's what we have to learn.
Well, I just love it when people turn up at these events. Yeah. That's a high bar. No, and speak with great passion and with heart, head and heart, to quote that beautiful John Martin song. So thank you for doing that, and thank you. And
can I finish with something, John?
Oh, well, yes.
Thank you.
And then I'll
give you this card to read.
It's an illustration of how far we've come as a nation. When I was a journalist for Radio New Zealand in the 1990s, in the late 80s, fella sitting at the back of the room over there, Tēnā koe te rangatira, Tamiti, was one of the most reviled. He was public enemy number 2. Yep, maybe 1 or 2. Reviled, and the newsroom treated him like the enemy. Now look at this fella, he's a celebrity.
Yeah.
Very, very clever communicator. He always was, I thought, one of New Zealand's most natural-born PR people. He knew how to get his message across, and at times that was very uncomfortable for a lot of New Zealanders. Look how far we've come.
Yeah, there's a beautiful scene in Hikoi. Tami, I don't know, have you seen that documentary, Hikoi Speaking Our Truth? Have you seen it? No, there's a beautiful scene in it when you're being interviewed and you say, oh, I used to show my bum and do all this kind of stuff, and you just giggle and you say, it's about the theatre, eh? I mean, he absolutely knows how to talk to us. And the rest of us have caught up with him, eh? At Waitangi, man, when your a big, gigantic floating art installation went across the lawn. It was a truly...
We just need to show more bum.
How to get a message across during the fiscal envelope hui, which was angry. It was an angry time, and there was a lot of heat in that debate. He comes into the hui in Eastern Bay of Plenty, stands up on his ladder and says, I'm going to talk from here because I'm not going to be looked down upon by the Crown.
Right. So I just have to read this. Thank you for supporting Featherston Booktown by purchasing tickets and attending the Karukatea Festival. There's a book signing table on the bookseller's marquee. I don't know if anyone's got a book. Has anyone got a book to sign? I don't know. Oh, fuck. Do support our writers and booksellers and purchase their books. Well, you
don't know why we're here. None of us are writers.
We'll bang out a haiku or something. If you would like a refreshing cup of tea or some buttery home-baked treats or one of my mum's Afghans, head through the door to the supper room at the back of this hall. Thank you very much. There are QR codes posted within this venue and around town. Please take some time to scan this and complete the short but very important online survey of your experience of Featherston Booktown. The team would love to receive your feedback so they can continue to improve your festival experience. These surveys also supply valuable information for fundraising bids. But I just want to say thank you all for coming. It's beautiful to see this many people here, on a Saturday morning. So I really appreciate it. And Chris, Craig, Josie, and Sue, thank you so much.
John.
Thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate it.